1. Every guy has that friend. You know the one I'm talking about. The friend that when some unfortunate future partner hears a story that begins with, "One time, friend and I," they tune out because the story is going to involve a lack of maturity, something gross, or the police. Tiberius was that friend to me, and I was that friend to him. That wasn't his real name, of course, but it sounds cool. Between the two of us, we managed to fill my house with exploded hot dog chunks, his house with smoke bomb smoke, and both houses with the stench of shits we took, but didn't flush while the other family was on vacation. I mean, we were the worst. The only reason our parents didn't ban the other from visiting was we didn't drink alcohol and we didn't smoke pot, so they figured despite the meat pranks, he once left a pound of meat on the counter while we were on vacation. And my obsession with swapping out their real eggs with ones I had filled with peanut butter, they figured it could be worse, so they let us be. One day I went to Tiberius's house. I was 19, he was still a senior in high school. Since I was homeschooled in a rural area with no car, my being graduated just meant I had to find someplace else to crank one out all day, because home was not a hangout for adults, and jobs were not plentiful in that community at the time. I got to his house, intending to make some shitty flash videos on his much nicer computer, expecting to have several hours of time to myself to make absurd comics. He was passed out from a hard night of Halo 1 and Mountain Dew butt chugs. He frequently missed entire days of school because of this. This was a moment that would define the next several years of my life. I saw a canning jar on his desk, and a McDonald's meal from the night before, and the realization came to me, the way I imagined the naked guy in the bathtub realized his ass had mass. I grabbed the food and some mushy milk in a cup that was also there and dumped it in the jar. Then I threw in some paintballs that happened to be on the desk as well, and sealed it up. I climbed a ladder and put it in the attic above his room where he wouldn't find it, and forgot about it. 6 months later, Tiberius discovers weed, and tries to hide in his attic to get high, blowing out the tiny little window up there that we later learned during the winter, if the wind was coming from the right direction, blew right into his grandmother's room. She couldn't talk though, so she couldn't narc. I still remember the picture text arriving on my Razor while working a landscaping job I had picked up. It was a photo of a jar filled with pure corruption, with a bulging top and dried drizzle down the side. Then a question mark. I explained what happened and we had a good laugh. That was our kind of BS. The next time I was over, we made 2 or 3 with the intention of putting them in someone else's house during a house party, where we knew they'd get broken. We did this every few months when we got bored, but never actually used them. This went on for 3 years. Finally, his parents wanted to use the attic, and we had to move them lest we be caught. We put the 20 or so jars in the garage, on a shelf way in the back, where surely they would never be found. A few months later, he moved out. 9 years later, I get this voicemail from Tiberius that's almost 100% incoherent laughter. His father had passed away the year before, and they were finally downsizing his mom into a new home. They had been cleaning out the old one when his uncle found the jars on the shelf and before Tiberius could say anything, opened one out of curiosity. His words, "It's like my body went from normal to, this is the end, make the cleanup for your family easier. It's bad enough as it is. Just accept this, lay down, and I'll shut this shit down in peace." He could not puke, the smell was so bad, but his uncle barfed bigly, dropping the jar. His uncle tried to avoid the splash and knocked a second jar off the shelf, which splattered on the floor and the wall, making the stench even worse. His mother had an absolute fucking cow until she learned it was something we did together. It didn't involve alcohol or drugs, so aside from a broken blood vessel in her eye, from the stress she got over it, little did she know at the time they discovered this, Tiberius and I had been meeting to get baked and watch Pokemon at least once a week, since the day he first discovered the original 6-month jar. 2. So this happened when I was 12. I am now 26. 12-year-old me was really into what, at the time, was WWF. One of my favorite wrestlers was Rob Van Dam, and his patented off-the-top ropes 5-star frog splash. Crowd roars. The 5-star frog splash is basically a belly flop, but onto another human's face. Every Monday and Thursday, I would watch wrestling before bed. Right before I'd get all cozy under the covers and wait for my sweet, sweet prepubescent dreams to take hold, I would do a 5-star frog splash onto my bed. One night after a sweet Royal Rumble, my little boy blood was pumping with testosterone so hard I could barely contain it. I go running into my room for bed and leap like I was the very embodiment of Rob Van Dam himself. Aside from that well-curated ponytail of his, could never pull that off, even in Fantasyland. Unbeknownst to me, my precious cat Marbles had taken up refuge under one of my blankets. So I'm flying through the air, feeling like a golden god, a real Adonis, sheer male perfection. And then I land, directly into my cat, testicles first. Marbles breaks out and goes claws up, as I immediately abandon all my manly thoughts. It hurt so bad, but I couldn't bring myself to even look at it. I was convinced that if I didn't see it, I could keep my shit together better. So I cup my balls in hand and start hobbling downstairs screaming, "Mom! Mom! Mom!" I get to the bottom of the stairs and look at my cupped hands to see blood dripping between my fingers. That can't be good, I thought. Just kidding, it was more like, fuck, what the fuck, my balls are definitely out of the sack! My mom rushes over and sees blood dripping out of my hands, which were cupped over my youthful coin purse, and goes, "Holy shit!" It did not inspire confidence. She brings me over to the bathroom and sits me down in the toilet with legs spread. She grabs some rubbing alcohol and just straight dumps it on my dangly bits. It burned so bad I started to cry. In an attempt to ease her child's sorrows, my quick-thinking mother decides it would be a good idea to blow on the affected area, for reasons I still cannot fathom. As soon as I felt her cold-ass breath on my junk, I screamed, "Mom!" Only then did she realize what the fuck she was doing. She stopped while beginning to have a laughing fit. What a first blowjob, am I right? She took me to the hospital where some grown men fondled my balls in the name of science, and patched me up. When it healed, the scar was in the shape of Texas, which I unfortunately brought to my very mature parents' attention. From then on, my nickname was Texas. I live in Canada, so there was always a lengthy explanation when my mom decided it was a good idea to call me that in front of future girlfriends. They sagged a bit over time, so now it looks more like Florida. 3. It all started when I was playing games on the couch and saw something out of the corner of my eye. I glanced over and didn't see anything at first, but did a double take when I realized that that black dot on the ceiling was a huge goddamned spider. Now here's the thing, I am a simple man with simple fears. I have a nervous breakdown almost every time I see a spider that's larger than a quarter. My brain goes into panic mode, and I make some stupid decisions in the name of killing spiders without getting too close. I've sprayed them with body spray, shaving cream, and squished them with various things attached to the end of my tripod. All of these things have consequences that make me ashamed to talk about, namely the mess. Well, this time I made the biggest mess I could have made. So there it is, on the ceiling. I get my trusty body spray and start spraying to try and make it run away. Usually spiders freak their shit when you spray them, but this asshole wasn't budging that much. I eventually get him to move further down the hall, but now he was above the bathroom door, which was probably the worst place it could have gone. I thought. After running out of spray, and after an hour and a half of nearly crying every time it moved, I was panicking that I would never get the courage to kill the stupid spider. And now it was blocking the bathroom and I needed to pee. Now this isn't where the mess came from, no. I peed into a bottle cleanly and safely. However, after that embarrassing moment of weakness, I decided enough was enough. grabbed a box and my tripod and squished the bastard. To imagine the scene that played out, just think Man of Steel, Superman killing Zod. Except the scream was internal, and I thought it was over. Nope. I thought it squished it, but there it was on the floor in front of the bathroom. It wasn't moving, but I wasn't risking anything. I grabbed some paper towel and threw it on top of the spider. Then I quickly squished it through the paper towel and squirmed with disgust. This is where my true fuck-up begins. I don't want to get remotely close to the spider, even though it was dead, because I'm a wimp for some reason. So I get more paper towel to help put some distance between it and me. I scooped up my crime and brought it into the bathroom, but instead of putting it in the trash like a normal person, I decided it would be a good idea to flush it. Too much paper towel, apparently. It did not want to go. I left it overnight to try and let it break down or something. Nope. Now after I flushed it again, it was caught just out of reach, so I couldn't even pull it out and put it in the trash. So I had no choice but to plunge it. I plunged for a good 15 minutes before it finally seemed to be fixed. The next day I go to use the bathroom and notice the water is at the lowest point in the bowl. I wonder what's up and try flushing. It fills back up to normal, apparently. Think nothing of it as I use the bathroom and go to flush for real. Uh-oh. It didn't really flush. It just filled up with more water. I start getting nervous and start plunging again. I get it to flush what I did, but it's still not flushing properly without plunging. I take the lid off the back and nothing's broken. I keep plunging and plunging harder and harder. Then out of the corner of my eye I see something terrifying. Dark, murky water is bubbling through the plug in the bathtub as I plunge. Oh, I done goofed. Now, I know the sewage pipe is blocked, and it's all my fault. I try using CLR to break down the blockage, but nothing works. I keep plunging, desperately trying to break the blockage free, until I hear something from the kitchen. I walk out and immediately notice a huge puddle forming on the floor. Yep. Now water was leaking from a pipe behind the kitchen cabinets. Great. Amazing. Wow. Wonderful. I realize I have fucked up irreparably. It's over. This is the part where I realize I haven't told you the best part. I live in the basement apartment of my grandparents' house, who were away for the weekend. The house is old, and luckily the bathtub and kitchen aren't operational anyway. But sending a text message explaining that the toilet was clogged so much that it was coming out of every other hole in the basement was one of the most shameful things I had ever done, even though I didn't tell them the whole story. Knowing I caused this would make it hard for me to look them in the eye for a while, especially since my poor old grandfather had to fix the drain himself and remove the papery grave of that spider. 4. A little bit of backstory. I'm from the northeast of England, and me and my fiancée have been travelling to Scotland with our friends, another couple, in the winter for the past few years now. We stay in a lovely cabin with heated floors and a hot tub, which is fantastic in the cold weather, particularly when it snows. As you can imagine, we spend a lot of time in the hot tub. It's pretty much the whole reason we go there. You know the feeling of freezing your ass off and then getting into a nice hot shower or bath? You can't beat it. Now back to the FU. It's a couple of days before we're supposed to leave to travel to the cabin, just a normal evening. Me and the other half had a nice meal of steaks and it was getting late. So we were getting ready to head up, watch some TV and hit the hay. Me and my partner have an agreement. She cooks the meals and I deal with the aftermath, wash the dishes, clean the kitchen, etc. She goes upstairs to get ready for bed and I crack on with my chores. I make a start on washing the dishes, starting with glasses obviously. Pick up a glass, shove my hand and soapy sponge inside, swish it around to get it all nice and clean, rinse it, place it on the draining board, repeat. I pick up another glass and follow the same procedure, except this time I'm swishing the sponge around inside the glass when, blam! The glass shatters in my hand. I don't feel any pain, so luckily I mustn't have cut myself, right? Wrong. I look down to find the water in the sink completely red, blood everywhere. Now there's still no pain to feel, so I inspect my hands to find that I'd completely sliced my pinky finger, and there was just a chunk of flesh hanging off, flapping around. At this point, I instinctively grab my hand and try to hold the flap against the rest of my finger where it's supposed to be while screaming upstairs for my partner. She comes rushing down in a panic, while I'm trying and failing to keep calm. I've never had an accident this bad before, so I didn't know what to do. There was a lot of blood that just wouldn't stop. My fiancé calls my parents, who only live a little way down the road, so they're able to get there very quickly and drive me to the hospital. We get to the hospital and I go through to see an A&E doctor. He takes a look at my hand and tells me I might need to see a hand specialist doctor. There might be an official title for that, but I don't know of it. He wraps it up and I have to sit in the waiting room to be seen by the specialist. I was still panicking at this point, because the bleeding just wouldn't stop, completely soaking through the bandage he'd wrapped it up in. So I finally get to go in and see the specialist. He sits me down, takes off the bandage around my finger to do an inspection. He gently takes hold of the flap of flesh hanging off my finger and moves it away a little bit to get a proper look at the wound when blood starts spurting out of my finger and hits me in the face. I still don't know how I didn't pass out after that happened. Turns out I'd completely cut an artery in my pinky, and also severed the nerves in that part of my finger. He proceeds to make a makeshift tourniquet out of a nitrile glove, give me some injections in my finger to numb the pain. The injections hurt more than the actual cut, and then stitches up my finger. It took 8 in total, I think. So after a couple of hours of getting fixed up, I'm able to leave the hospital and calm down. Then I remember that we leave to go to the cabin in a few days. Obviously, it would be a very bad idea to get this fresh wound wet, so when we get to Scotland, I have to wear a dog poo bag wrapped around my hand, and keep it sticking out of the hot tub at all times. Kinda ruined the entire holiday. 5. Mandatory this didn't happen today. This happened shortly after I turned 16. I'm now 21. As I had just turned 16, I got the "you're old enough to get a job" talk from my mom. I figured why not look for a job, and apply to all the basic stereotypical first job fast food locations. None really piqued my sophisticated 16-year-old interests, so I started to apply to local mom-and-pop shops. I ended up finding work as an assistant florist for a small family-owned business. Now I love flowers, and figured this was a pretty sweet gig. No difficult customer interactions, no heavy labor, no nonsense. I show up to my first day at work with great enthusiasm, and eagerly began completing the tasks assigned to me. Wash the vases. The vases were clear and about 2 feet tall. The sink I was to wash them in was a standard kitchen sink. A little tricky to maneuver, but nonetheless I felt confident in my abilities to wash dishes of any size, and began washing the vases with gusto. This is where I fuck up. In my excitement to be a first-rate employee and work efficiently, I was moving far too fast for someone as accident-prone as myself. I dropped the vase. But I couldn't just let it fall, oh no. I had to try to catch it, on the rebound with both hands. I reflexively reach out to save the already shattered vase, grasping broken shards of glass with both hands. It took me a second to realize the massive fuck-up I've just made. My boss, hearing the sound of glass breaking, rushes in a very pitiful attempt to hide the evidence of my stupidity. I shove both of my hands under the stream of water, but this just adds to the horror as the water runs red. My boss runs over to see my hands. I nearly severed my ring finger. It's bleeding pretty heavily. My co-worker, also a classmate, runs in and sees that I'm covered in blood and begins to hyperventilate. "I fainted the sight of blood! I fainted the sight of blood! Oh God!" I'm thoroughly embarrassed that when tasked with doing the dishes, I managed to maim myself. I also really feel guilty that I broke a vase on my first day and now I'm bleeding all over my boss's towels. My co-worker's screams of terror weren't really helping me feel any better. I flushed red out of embarrassment, and suddenly my boss is screaming too. "Oh, she's gone red! She's gonna faint! Quick, blow on her!" So now my boss and his wife are fanning me frantically with their hands and blowing into my face. I start crying because what the actual fuck is going on? Didn't really prepare for this. My boss has me sit down and calls my mom. My mom shows up minutes later, camera in tow, prepared to record my humiliation. I'm sitting down, blood-stained, with tears rolling down my cheeks, and my mom comes in with a big old grin on her face. She is unsurprised I managed to bloody myself on my first day. She is aware of my overinflated sense of self and debilitating clumsiness. She drives me to the hospital where I'm told I need stitches for my ring finger. I also have a very unfortunately placed horizontal cut on my wrist, from the vase that raises a few eyebrows from nurses, who try to gently ask if it was there before the incident. The doctor comes in to patch me up, and fills my finger up with some nice numbing juice. Can't be bothered to try to remember the correct word for numbing juice. Numbing juice works a charm, and suddenly I'm not in pain anymore, but I'm still jacked on adrenaline and jittery from my massive screw-up. For some reason, this combination of adrenaline, embarrassment, and jitters causes me to act insanely stupid. Impressed that I can no longer feel my finger, I turn to my mother and bend my partially severed finger as far back as possible. "Look, Ma, I bet I could rip my finger off." The doc is floored, giving me and my mom a, "What the fuck is this devil child doing?" And he says he's never had to tell a patient not to rip their own finger, and reminds me I haven't been medicated, just numbed. All this stupid is me. It's all me. He tells me to sit still, stop ripping off my finger, and stop playing with my finger, because we need a sterile environment. He sews me up, chuckling to himself. I leave the hospital feeling ashamed of myself, and vow to never return. So a few weeks later I take out my stitches myself too early. I just stick a band-aid on my finger and call it a day. No infection, and only a faint scar. Edit. Some clarification, since I've seen quite a few comments expressing concern at my mom's decision to record me. We are a family of dark humor. I am a huge drama queen. For the entirety of my life, I have gauged the severity of a situation based on how others react to it. Thus, if my mom freaks out, I will freak out more because Mom is freaking out, so it must be bad. If she's laughing and poking fun at me, it must not be too serious. I'll live to see another day. My mom is a saint, but a saint with a dark, at times, heretical humor. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 78. Just want to give a shout out to the author of story number 3. They have a YouTube channel. I cannot pronounce that name. Baboon something. Baboonaya? Baboon. Anyway, I'll include a link to it in the description. It looks like they have quite an eclectic choice of content. And you guys, if you want to go over, check it out, then please do. Okay, and with that, I'm going to wish you all a good weekend and head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.